My name is Ethan Cole, and I've been a park ranger for 7 years now, long enough to understand that the forest doesn't always behave like it's supposed to. Sometimes it feels alive, like it breathes when the wind moves, like it listens when you speak. Black Ridge National Park is a beautiful place on the surface, miles of untouched wilderness, pine forests that stretch forever, rivers that sing when the air is clear. But once the sun goes down, it turns into something else entirely. The woods stop sounding like woods. They start to sound like something waiting. I wasn't supposed to be stationed at Tower 9. My regular post was Ridge Point Station, safe, busy, civilized. It had a working heater, a radio that didn't hiss, and a paved trail where tourists passed every few hours. Tower 9 was the opposite. Deep in the western ridge, it was a relic, half burned during the 2019 wildfire, left to rot and rust in the middle of nowhere. So when my supervisor, Dean Harper, called me into his office and dropped a file on the desk, I already knew I wouldn't like it. "Cole," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he always did when he was about to say something stupid. "Tower 9's unmanned. The cameras are offline again. You'll head up there tomorrow, spend a few nights, make sure the place is still standing." I laughed, waiting for the punchline. "You're serious?" He nodded. "We don't have a choice. The last patrol out there didn't finish their inspection. Something spooked them off the ridge." "What do you mean something spooked them?" I asked. He didn't answer, just pushed the file closer. Inside were photos, blurry ones, black and white stills from an old trail camera. One showed a shadow between the trees. Another showed, I don't know what. It looked like a person, but stretched, like its body didn't understand how to fit together. "Just go," Dean said. "A few days. Make sure no one's been messing around out there. We've had reports of vandalism." "Right," I muttered. "Vandals." He didn't laugh. Everyone knew Tower 9's history. During the 2019 wildfire, 2 people had died there, Ranger Alina Price and a volunteer, Marcus Hill. The official report said they jumped to escape the flames, but every ranger who'd been around long enough knew something didn't add up. They'd radioed for help hours before the fire reached their area. When rescue arrived, the tower was half burned, but the fire had come from inside. Nobody volunteered to cover Tower 9 anymore. Nobody even talked about it. The next morning, I packed up my truck, canned food, sleeping bag, thermal camera, shortwave radio, flashlight, sidearm. It was supposed to be a routine check, 2 nights at most. I told myself that over and over during the 3-hour drive up the dirt road that coiled through the forest like a scar. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun was melting into the horizon, staining everything gold and red. The fire watch tower stood in the middle, tall and crooked, its metal steps groaning in the wind. The top cabin looked like it had been forgotten by time-cracked windows, black scorch marks across the wood, a dented sign that still read, "T9 Fire Lookout." When I climbed up, every step complained beneath my boots. The air got thinner, colder. Inside, the place smelled like rust, ash, and something faintly metallic, like blood. There was an old logbook sitting on the desk, half covered in dust. Out of habit, I flipped through it. Most of the entries were normal weather notes, fire reports, animal sightings. But the last page, dated August 23rd, 2019, stopped me cold. "We see lights in the trees again. They're moving closer." That was it. No signature, no follow-up. Just that one sentence scratched into the page like Someone had written it in a hurry. I closed the book, trying to ignore the way my fingers trembled. By 8 p.m., the forest was quiet. Too quiet. I made a perimeter check like we're trained to do, flashlight in hand, radio clipped to my vest. The air smelled damp, heavy, with the kind of stillness that makes you aware of your heartbeat. That's when I found the boot prints. They were at the base of the tower, half filled with rainwater, fresh, not ranger issue. The soles were thick, industrial, like something a contractor or logger might wear. But there hadn't been any maintenance crews in this part of the park for years. I followed them for a few feet before they just stopped. Not like whoever made them turned around, just gone mid-stride, like they'd stepped into thin air. Back in the tower, I locked the hatch behind me and wrote it down in my log. My handwriting didn't look right. It was tight, uneven. I poured myself a cup of instant coffee and turned on the radio. Station check. Tower 9 to base, copy? Static. Tower 9 to Ridgepoint, you copy? More static. Then, faintly, something else. A crackle, then a low voice, almost too soft to hear. 9. Base. Say again? Nothing. The rest of the night was a blur of little sounds that shouldn't have existed, floorboards creaking even when I wasn't moving, tapping near the window, faint whispers carried by the wind. I told myself it was the structure settling. That's what it's always supposed to be. At 11:43 p.m., I decided to scan the tree line with the spotlight. When I swung the beam across the forest, everything looked normal. Pines, rocks, fallen logs. But when I panned left, something reflected the light back, not eyes, not metal, but something that shimmered like heat rising off asphalt. I froze. The light distortion shifted like it was breathing. Then it slid behind a tree and disappeared. I kept the spotlight trained there for another 5 minutes. Nothing moved. When I finally shut it off, the tower felt smaller, like something was leaning against it from outside, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, rifle across my lap, listening to the wind and the faint rhythm of something tapping against the steel frame. Around 2 a.m., the radio came alive again, a burst of static followed by a voice. It wasn't bass. It wasn't anyone I knew. The voice was warped, like it was being dragged through water. Come down. I didn't move. Ethan. My throat went dry. No one outside of base should have known I was here. My post hadn't even been updated in the public schedule yet. I reached for the mic, hesitated, then asked, "Who is this?" Static, then a faint chuckle, low, wet, like someone laughing through blood. The transmission cut off. I switched the radio off completely after that. The silence felt safer. By dawn, I convinced myself it was exhaustion, maybe feedback from another tower. When you're alone long enough, you start hearing what you expect to hear. But the boot prints at the base of the stairs were gone, completely, not faded, erased. The mud was smooth, untouched, like something had wiped the ground clean. And on the outside wall of the tower, just below the hatch, there was a handprint. Long fingers, deep grooves, not human. I touched it. It was cold, damp. The wood around it looked warped, almost melted. That day, I should have left. I know that now. I told myself I'd make one more night of observations, file a report, and get the hell out. But that was before I found the camera. It was buried in the supply closet under a pile of burned equipment, an old trail cam, the kind we used before digital. The tape inside was still intact. I took it out, loaded it into the small handheld player from my kit, and hit play. The footage was shaky, night vision green. Someone had placed the camera facing the forest just below the tower. For a few minutes, all it showed were trees swaying in the wind. Then, around the 2-minute mark, something stepped into view. It was tall, maybe 7 feet. Its body shimmered like the air above fire. You could almost see through it, veins of light pulsing under the skin. It turned toward the camera, and for a split second, its face came into focus. It wasn't a face at all. It was something trying to remember how to be one. The tape ended with the sound of footsteps on metal stairs, then a scream. I turned off the player and sat there for a long time, staring at the trees through the window. I thought about Alina Price and Marcus Hill, about the way their last entry said, "Lights in the trees." That night, I decided I wasn't sleeping again. I kept every light in the tower on, every flashlight within reach. By midnight, the forest was breathing again. That's the only way I can describe it. The pines swayed in unison like lungs expanding. The wind picked up not cold, but hot, like the air from a furnace. Then the lights came. They started deep in the woods, dozens of them, weaving between trees, flickering like lanterns. They moved with purpose, not random, almost circling the tower. I grabbed my binoculars. They weren't lanterns. They were shapes, tall, thin, and glowing, faintly orange, like embers walking upright. I stumbled backward and hit the radio again, yelling for bass. No response, only the same voice as before, whispering through static. "Hey, come down." The lights stopped moving. Every single one of them turned toward the tower. And that's when the generator died. The lights inside flickered once, twice, and the cabin was swallowed in black. Below me, the stairs groaned. Something was climbing. The following morning, the forest didn't feel like the same place. The air was heavier, colder. The sun never quite broke through the mist, and the radio static felt louder than usual. I hadn't slept, just sat at my desk, watching the walls breathe in the dim light, the whisper of wind pressing against the glass like someone murmuring secrets outside. At 7:03 a.m., HQ checked in. Tower 9, status. "Still fogged in," I said, my voice hoarse. "No signs of movement?" A pause crackled through the static. Then, "Copy that. Tower 4 reported seeing movement near the northern ridge last night. Could be hikers ignoring closure signs. Keep an eye out." "Roger that." I didn't mention what I'd seen or heard. If I told them there was something pacing in the dark that knew my name, I'd be pulled out for a psych eval. But the forest knows when you're lying to yourself. I brewed another pot of coffee and stepped out onto the deck. My breath fogged up the air. Below, the trees looked like they were waiting. There's a particular stillness in the woods after something dies. It's like the forest holds its breath, listening. That's what it felt like. Around mid-morning, I heard footsteps crunching through the frost on the trail below. Relief flickered through me for half a second. A hiker, maybe. But when I looked through the binoculars, the path was empty. Still, the sound kept moving, slow, deliberate, like boots on gravel. Then the footsteps stopped directly below the tower. The hairs on my arms lifted. I leaned over the rail. "Hello?" Nothing, just silence. The woods swallowed my voice. I waited for what felt like 10 minutes before I finally heard a faint shuffle retreating back into the trees. When I climbed back inside, The radio clicked once, softly, then a whisper. "Ranger, you're not supposed to be here." I froze. It wasn't HQ. It wasn't any frequency I recognized. The signal was faint, but clear. A woman's voice, distorted, as if underwater. "Who is this?" I asked. Static. "Identify yourself," I said, louder this time. Then, faintly, "Tower 9 wasn't rebuilt." That line sent something cold crawling up my spine. I grabbed the emergency map, tracing the coordinates. Tower 9 had been rebuilt 5 years ago after a lightning strike destroyed the old one. At least, that's what HQ told us. But if that wasn't true, then what the hell was I sitting in? The fog thickened as the day dragged on. I could barely see the first row of trees below. The sun never fully came out, and by dusk, I felt trapped in a pocket of colorless light. Around 6 p.m., I made my rounds inside, flashlight in hand, checking the storage closet, bunks, kitchen. When I reached the supply room, I noticed something strange. The trap door to the crawl space was open. I hadn't touched it since my first day here. The ladder creaked when I shined the light down. I called out, "Anyone down there?" Silence. Then something shifted below. It sounded like fabric dragging across wood. "HQ, this is Tower 9, I said into the radio. "I think we've got an intruder under the floor requesting backup." The response came a moment later, but it wasn't HQ. "Don't let it out." I dropped the mic. The sound below grew louder, wet, uneven breathing, echoing up the ladder. I slammed the trapdoor shut and shoved a crate over it. The boards beneath my feet thumped once like a fist from below. I backed into the corner and watched the wood pulse with each hit. Then it stopped. For a long time there was nothing, just the faint hum of the radio and the wind through the slats. I waited for hours, afraid to move. At 1:12 a.m., the trapdoor creaked open again, by itself. The trapdoor lifted an inch, wood groaning against rusted hinges. My flashlight trembled in my grip. I couldn't breathe. Then silence again. The air was so still, I could hear my pulse thudding in my neck. I inched closer, each step like walking on glass. The opening yawned just wide enough for a shadow to slip through. And then, softly, 3 taps. Knock, knock, knock. Something was knocking from underneath. I stumbled back, grabbed the rifle from the gun rack by instinct. But there was no target, just that slow, rhythmic knocking. It wasn't frantic or violent. It was measured, patient, like whatever was down there knew I had nowhere else to go. The knocks stopped after a minute. Then a whisper came through the floorboards. "Ranger." I aimed the rifle at the opening. "Who's there?" The whisper came again, closer this time. "You shouldn't have come back." The light flickered, dimmed, and went out. I could still see faint outlines from the glow of the radio dial. The trapdoor was fully open now. The ladder creaked once, twice. Something was climbing up. I fired. The sound thundered in the small space. Wood splintered. When the light blinked back to life, the ladder was empty, but blood, dark and slick, spattered the rungs. I backed away, heart slamming in my chest. The air smelled of wet soil and iron. Then, from the darkness beneath the open hatch, a low voice rasped, "Why, did you build it again?" The question froze me. Every ranger knew Tower 9 had burned down after a lightning strike. That's what they told us during orientation. But the way that voice said "again," like it remembered, made my stomach twist. I barricaded the trapdoor with everything I could find, storage crates, the emergency locker, even the bunk mattress. Then I radioed HQ again, desperate. Tower 9 to base, I need immediate evac. Something's in the structure. I've been attacked. Static. Then, Tower 9, we don't have you on the grid. What do you mean? I shouted. This is Ranger Keller in Tower 9. Coordinates? The radio hissed louder, drowning me out. Then it went dead. I threw the headset, breathing hard. For a long time, I just sat in the dark listening to the wind moan through the gaps in the wood. Eventually, I must have dozed off in the chair, because the next thing I remember was sunlight stabbing through the window. Morning. The fog was gone. The forest looked normal again, quiet, beautiful even. The trapdoor was closed, perfectly flush with the floor, the barricade untouched. For a moment, I wondered if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Isolation does that to people. Lack of sleep, the mind bends. Then I saw the footprints. Mud-cake prints across the floor, leading from the trapdoor to the door of the tower, and then out onto the deck. They were large, uneven, barefoot. I followed them outside, rifle in hand. They stopped halfway across the deck and then vanished, as if whoever made them had stepped off the side. I looked down. 60 feet below the ground was undisturbed. No impact, no drag marks, just pine needles and moss. When I climbed back in, something caught my eye on the radio table, a small wooden carving, a little effigy of a man in a ranger's hat. I hadn't seen it before. It was carved crudely, but the details were unmistakable. The face was mine, and scratched into its base. We told you not to rebuild. I packed my gear by noon. I didn't even wait for clearance. I just left. The descent down the ridge trail felt endless. The forest was silent, except for my footsteps. I reached the old access road around dusk and started the 4-mile hike toward the ranger station. My radio crackled once, just static, and I ignored it. Then it spoke again, faintly. Tower 9 to base, copy. My breath caught. That was my voice. I froze on the trail, clutching the radio. Base, do you read? Intruder at the door. I repeat, something's outside. It was the same transmission I'd sent the night before, word for word, playing again. I turned the radio off, shoved it into my pack, and started running. I didn't stop until I saw the dim orange lights of the main outpost. When I got there, 2 rangers, Miller and Strauss, looked at me like they'd seen a ghost. Keller, Strauss said slowly, you're supposed to be in Tower 12. What? No, I was reassigned to Tower 9 last month. They exchanged a glance. Miller pulled up the map on the wall and pointed. Tower 9 burned down in '98. We never rebuilt it. I laughed at first. Then I saw the dates on the paperwork. And the photo. Charred rubble, collapsed metal, trees blackened by fire. Then what the hell was I in? I whispered. Nobody answered. That night, I couldn't sleep in the barracks. I lay awake, listening to the forest breathe through the windows. Every so often, the radio on the wall would pop faintly, static, like something trying to break through. And once, just once, my own voice came through again, whispering, don't let it out. Story 2. They sent me to Black Ridge Preserve at the tail end of summer, when the nights were still hot, but the air already smelled of decay. I'd done ranger work before, fire patrols, wildlife tracking, rescues, but this place was different. The forest felt too still, too contained, like it was holding its breath. The drive in took almost 2 hours from the last sign of civilization. The dirt road narrowed until it was barely wide enough for the truck. At one point, I had to stop and cut fallen branches just to pass through. When I finally reached the base camp, there were 2 small cabins, a storage shed, and a rusted water tower that looked one bad storm away from collapse. No one greeted me. There was supposed to be another ranger stationed here, Ranger Paulson, but his truck was gone. The radio logbook on the table said his last check-in was 3 nights ago. Routine patrol, returning by dawn. He never did. HQ hadn't seemed worried. Probably got turned around on the northern trails. The dispatcher said, "They're dense this time of year. You'll find 'em." But I've been in enough forest to know when something's wrong. The silence in Black Ridge wasn't natural. No insects, no bird calls, not even wind. Just the creak of old pines bending under their own weight. That night, I lit a fire behind the cabin and cooked beans from a can. My radio crackled once, soft static, but an old voice came through. I thought maybe Paulson would respond if he was out there. I keyed the mic. "Base to Ranger Paulson. This is Ranger Elkins. You copy?" Nothing. When darkness settled, it felt absolute. I could barely see my own boots past the glow of the fire. I kept catching movement in the tree line, faint shifts of shadow, but every time I shined my flashlight, there was nothing, just trees and the hollow rustle of leaves. I turned in early, locking the door. I don't usually scare easy, but that night I shoved a chair under the handle anyway. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a sound. It was faint, almost gentle at first, a dragging noise, like something heavy sliding across dirt. I held my breath. The sound moved along the outer wall of the cabin, slow, deliberate, circling. Then came the tap. A soft knock on the wood near the window. I reached for my flashlight, heart pounding, and aimed it toward the sound. Nothing. The window was fogged with condensation from my breath. Then another knock, higher up. It was testing the wall. I stayed perfectly still until the sound moved away. After a few minutes, I heard twigs snap near the tree line. The forest swallowed the noise again. I didn't sleep after that. At dawn, I found the ground disturbed outside. Deep furrows like claws dragging through the mud, spaced too far apart for any bear or cougar. Whatever it was, it had stood on 2 legs. I followed the tracks for maybe a quarter mile before they vanished into the undergrowth. I didn't have enough daylight to track further, so I marked the spot and returned to camp. Around noon, the radio finally came alive. "Ranger Elkins, this is HQ. Status on Paulson?" "Still missing," I said, "but there's something else here." "Wildlife?" I hesitated, not sure it's wildlife. The line went quiet. Then, "Elkins, stay sharp. Black Ridge isn't a tourist site. It's an old reserve. Locals said the area was off limits even before the service bought it. Just keep your wits about you." That was the first time I'd ever heard HQ sound uneasy. I spent the rest of the day scouting the area, checking the perimeter fence, cataloging trail markers. I found a set of Paulson's boot prints near the old Ranger Tower, 3 miles north. They ended abruptly at the edge of a dried-up creek bed, like he'd stopped mid-step and never moved again. There were drag marks there, too. By evening, the forest came alive again, not with animals, but with sound. Low hums, clicking noises that echo between the trees, like 2 stones being tapped together. I recorded it on my phone, but playback just gave static. At sundown, I climbed the watchtower. The structure swayed with every gust of wind, and the steps creaked like bones underfoot. From up there, I could see the whole valley. The treetops looked endless, black waves under a dying red sky. Then I saw something move. About 100 yards from the base of the tower, between the pines, something tall, thin, walking upright. I aimed the binoculars. It froze. Even from that distance, I could see the pale reflection of its face, smooth, featureless, like wet porcelain. It tilted its head toward me, almost curious. And then it smiled. Not with a mouth. There was no mouth. It smiled with its whole face stretching upward, skin rippling like fabric. I dropped the binoculars. By the time I looked again, it was gone. The forest went dead silent. For a long minute I didn't move. The air around the tower felt wrong, heavy, like something was pressing against it from all directions. My flashlight beam cut through a thin haze drifting up from the trees below, and for a heartbeat I swore I saw that smiling stretch of skin flash between the trunks again. Then the wind stopped. Everything did. No rustle, no creak, only my own breathing, ragged and fast. When I finally climbed down, my hands were trembling. I tried to call HQ, but the radio only gave back bursts of static. The signal light flickered red, meaning it was being jammed or interfered with. That's when I realized something else. The noises weren't gone. They just changed. Now it was whispering. Not words, not in any language I knew. It was low, overlapping, like two people talking in a tunnel, voices blending into each other. Sometimes it was behind me. Sometimes it came from right above my head. By the time I got back to the cabin, it had stopped. I locked myself inside again and sat with my flashlight pointed at the door. I told myself to wait until sunrise. But sleep came anyway, uneasy, jagged, full of half-formed dreams. I remember one of them clearly, a man standing at the tree line wearing my uniform, waving me closer. He had no eyes, no mouth, just skin where his face should have been. When I woke, there were fingerprints on the window glass, 5 long streaks that ended halfway down the pane like something had leaned in to look at me while I slept. That morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit here waiting to be next. I'd find Paulson, or what was left of him, and get out. I loaded my pack with a flare gun, compass, radio, and enough food for a day's hike. I marked my route on a paper map in case I lost the GPS. I followed the drag marks again to the creek bed, then moved north where the ground sloped downward into a valley. The forest changed there. The trees grew closer together, bark peeling in thin curls. The light dimmed, filtered through layers of moss and webbing. I found remnants of an old fence line, barbed wire rusted almost to dust, the kind ranchers used decades ago. On one post, I saw a sign so faded I had to scrape the moss off to read it. Property of Ridge Coal Mining Comistow, 1958. The mine had been sealed years ago. HQ's files said the preserve was built over reclaimed land. But seeing that fence, the disturbed earth, I knew something had been buried here long before the government called it a park. I followed a trail of prints, bare feet, long, uneven strides, down to where the old quarry pit used to be. The place was half collapsed, a crater rimmed by black water that reflected nothing. There was a shack nearby, half swallowed by vines. Inside, I found a cot, a lantern, and a ranger's badge. The name tag read, Paulson. The cot was still warm. I froze. There was movement behind me. A branch cracked, then another, closer this time. I turned slowly. Something was crouched by the door frame, tall enough that its head brushed the ceiling. For a second, I thought it was a man. It was wearing what looked like a torn ranger jacket, Paulson's jacket, but the skin underneath shimmered in the light, almost translucent, like stretched animal hide. It spoke. "Elkins!" It said my name, in Paulson's voice. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The thing tilted its head, that same awful imitation of curiosity. Then it stepped forward, each foot making no sound on the dirt floor. I fired the flare gun straight into its chest. The room lit up with red light, and the thing convulsed, its skin bubbling, changing color, melting the uniform right off its frame. It let out a noise that wasn't a scream, more like metal scraping metal, and shot backward into the shadows. I ran. Didn't stop until I was halfway up the ridge, lungs burning, ears ringing. Behind me, the forest howled, not with wind, but with something alive and furious. When I reached the cabin again, I didn't go inside. I climbed straight to the tower. The sun was setting, and I needed the height to get a signal out. The radio sputtered once, then caught. "HQ, this is Ranger Elkins. Paulson's dead. Something's out here, and it's not..." Static. Then a voice that wasn't HQ's came through. "Elkins." It was my voice this time. "Come back down." I dropped the radio. It kept repeating over and over, my own tone slightly off, like a tape recorded and played through water. When I looked toward the cabin, I saw movement inside. Through the window, I saw me, standing by the table, picking up my backpack, looking up at the tower, and smiling. I didn't move for a full minute. My own face, my own body, was standing inside that cabin, moving with a strange stiffness, like a puppet trying to remember how to walk. It tilted its head toward the tower again and raised one hand, palm open, as if waving. I took a step back. The whole tower creaked beneath my weight. Below, the doppelganger turned toward the sound. Slowly, almost gracefully, it stepped outside. The movement was fluid in a way no human walk could ever be, each stride too long, the joints bending just a bit too far. The last of the sunlight caught its face, and I could see the imitation beginning to crack. Skin splitting along the edges, pale light glowing from underneath, like something inside was trying to claw its way out. I backed up another step, gripping the railing. "Elkins!" it called, my own voice distorted. "Come down. It's getting dark." Then it smiled again, the same stretched, skinless grin. I raised the flare gun, but my hands were shaking so bad I could hardly aim. The thing didn't seem afraid of it this time. It reached the base of the tower and started climbing. Every instinct told me to run, to jump, to do anything, but there was nowhere to go. The forest below looked bottomless, the trees swaying like an ocean of shadows. The steps below me groaned one by one. It was coming up slowly, deliberately enjoying it. Halfway up, the wood splintered under its weight, but it didn't stop. It reached out a long arm, longer than it should have been, and gripped the next beam. Its fingers sank into the wood like wet clay. When it spoke again, it didn't even try to sound like me. "You came back here," it hissed. "You never leave." That voice, it was many voices. Paulson's, mine, others I didn't recognize, all overlapping. I fired. The flare hit its chest and exploded into blinding red fire. The thing convulsed again, thrashing. But this time it didn't fall. It lunged upward faster than I could react. Its hand wrapped around my boot. The skin was cold, almost slimy, but beneath it I could feel the bones moving, shifting, like a bag of stones rolling together. I kicked, slamming the butt of the flare gun into its arm until it let go. The tower rocked violently. The creature fell backward, hit the ground, and shattered like glass. But even as I watched, the pieces began to crawl toward each other again, thin strings of black liquid pulling the chunks back into shape. That was enough for me. I jumped. The drop knocked the air out of me, but adrenaline kept me moving. I landed hard, scrambled up, and ran through the dark, crashing through branches and thorns. I didn't care which direction. I just needed to get out. The forest had changed again. Trails I knew were gone, replaced by new paths that wound in impossible circles. Every few minutes, I'd see the flare light flicker behind me, red and pulsing, as if the forest itself were bleeding. Then I found the mine entrance. It wasn't sealed anymore. The metal doors hung open, one bent completely off its hinge. Inside, faint light pulsed rhythmically like a heartbeat, and under that glow, I saw movement, figures walking, dozens of them, all in torn ranger uniforms. Their faces were smooth and pale. Some were mine, some were Paulson's, some were no one's. They moved toward me without sound, merging and separating like smoke. Elkins, they whispered together. You saw the light. You belong here now. Something in the back of my mind remembered that voice, not from now, but from when I first accepted this assignment, that brief static on the radio before HQ called back. Maybe it hadn't been interference at all. Maybe it had been this. The hum deepened, vibrating through the ground. The air thickened. Every shadow stretched toward me. I turned and ran, not caring that the path behind me twisted, that the trees seemed to rearrange themselves. I ran until my legs gave out. When I finally collapsed, dawn was breaking over the ridge. The forest was quiet again. No figures, no hum, no whisper. I stumbled back to the base camp sometime after sunrise. The cabin door was open. My pack was gone. The chair I jammed under the handle was back where it belonged, neatly pushed in under the table. And the radio, dead for days, was on. It crackled once. Then a voice came through. Ranger Elkins, this is HQ. Copy. I grabbed the mic. HQ, it's Elkins. There's something in Black Ridge. It killed Paulson. Copy that, the voice said. Stay put. We're sending replacement personnel to your position. Replacement? I asked. For who? Silence. Then, softly, for you. The radio went dead. That night, I left. I don't even remember driving, just the road, unspooling endlessly in my headlights until the forest was gone behind me. I turned in my badge 2 days later. They didn't question it. But sometimes, when the wind's just right, I can hear that hum again. And once at a gas station off Highway 43, I looked up from the pump and saw my reflection in the glass door. It smiled first. 3 weeks after I left the service, I started dreaming in radio static. Every night it was the same. I'd hear a voice through the fuzz, sometimes Paulson's, sometimes my own, repeating one word, copy, over and over until it turned into laughter. I'd wake drenched in sweat, the phantom sound of the tower wind still echoing in my ears. I was living out of a small rental outside Flagstaff by then. I told people I'd retired early, burned out on the wilderness life. Truth was, I couldn't stand the woods anymore. Even the trees behind the house felt too tall, like they were leaning in to listen. The Park Service hadn't asked many questions when I quit, just paperwork, signatures, and a polite thank you for your service. No mention of Black Ridge, no search for Paulson, no incident report. It was like neither of us had ever existed. Still, the guilt wouldn't leave. I replayed that night again and again. The mind, the voices, the doppelgangers crawling from the pit. The rational part of my mind kept whispering that I'd hallucinated it all. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe bad air from old mining vents. Maybe Paulson's disappearance had broken something in me. Wow. But deep down I knew better. The first sign came on the fourth night. I was unpacking groceries when the radio on my counter, an old handheld scanner I'd kept for weather alerts, crackled to life. A voice came through, faint and warped. "Ranger Elkins, do you copy?" I froze. It was my voice. The scanner wasn't even tuned to any active channel. I yanked the batteries out, tossed it into the trash, and tried to laugh it off. But the laugh came out shaky, hollow. That night, the dreams got worse. This time I wasn't in the forest. I was inside my own house, sitting at the kitchen table when I heard the front door open. The footsteps that entered sounded exactly like mine. Same rhythm, same weight. I turned toward the sound, and there I was, walking toward myself, smiling that same awful, stretched smile. When I woke, the front door was standing wide open. After that, I started hearing small things. A faint tap from inside the walls. The creak of floorboards when I wasn't moving. Once, I swore I heard the whisper of a radio from somewhere under the floorboards. I called HQ after 2 sleepless nights. I told them about the dreams, about the strange interference. The man who answered didn't introduce himself. Just silence for a few seconds, then a flat, almost mechanical voice. "This is an automated line. Please confirm your name and location." "Elkins, former Ranger, Idaho, 4271, I said. "I was stationed at Black Ridge. I think something followed me home." More silence. Then the faint sound of pages turning, or maybe tape unwinding. "Ranger Elkins," the voice said finally, "your assignment file is closed. Black Ridge Preserve does not exist." "What the hell are you talking about?" I snapped. "It's on the goddamn map." "No, sir," the voice replied. "That designation was decommissioned in 1979. You are mistaken." Then the line went dead. I checked the map later. The preserve wasn't there anymore. Not on paper, not online, nothing. Just blank terrain, a stretch of forest labeled restricted area. That's when I knew the truth. The thing that lived in those woods didn't just kill, it erased. The next week, I started noticing people watching my house. A white SUV parked across the road at odd hours. A man in a ranger's jacket, too clean, too new, standing under the streetlight, never moving. Every time I went out to confront them, they were gone. I tried to tell myself it was paranoia, the mind cracking under pressure. But then, one evening, I came home to find muddy footprints leading from my front door to the kitchen table. There was a badge sitting there, my badge, the one I'd turned in. And next to it, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle. It looked like an old incident report. Only one line was legible. Subject: Ranger Elkins recovered from Black Ridge excavation site. Status: contained. I dropped it, Backing away so fast I hit the counter. My phone started ringing in my pocket. Unknown number. I answered, breath shaking. "Elkins," the voice said. "You left your post." It was me. The call cut off, but the static didn't. It spread, filling the room, humming through the walls until the lights flickered. And in that hum, underneath the distortion, I could hear something else. A faint chorus of voices, layered and wet. Paulson's voice was among them. "Don't look," he whispered. "It finds you through reflection." The window beside me darkened, though the sun hadn't set yet, and in the glass I saw movement, my reflection turning its head toward me before I could move. It smiled. I didn't sleep that night. Every surface in that house felt wrong. The glass on the photo frames, the chrome on the faucet, even the glossy finish of the floorboards. Wherever I turned, I could almost feel the reflections watching back. At 2:43 a.m., I covered the mirrors with towels. By 3 o'clock, I draped blankets over the windows and unplugged the TV. It didn't matter. I could still sense it, like a faint pressure behind my eyes. A second set of thoughts crowded my own. When dawn came, I tore open every curtain just to prove daylight still meant something. The world outside looked normal enough. Same pale Arizona sunlight, same quiet road, but the white SUV was parked there again, engine off, no driver visible. I picked up my phone and took a picture. For half a second, the image froze on the screen. Then the driver's side window in the photo darkened, and a face appeared, my own, grinning back. The phone slipped from my hand. The screen cracked, the image freezing on that warped reflection of me, eyes too wide, teeth too white. That was when I realized something. It wasn't just imitating me, it was replacing me piece by piece. I left the house that morning, packed what little I needed: flashlight, knife, an old revolver, and a map I'd printed from memory, and drove north, back toward where Black Ridge was supposed to be. I figured if this thing had followed me out, maybe the only way to stop it was to go back in. But the roads didn't match anymore. Every turn I took led somewhere wrong. A dead end, a bridge that shouldn't exist, an unmarked road looping back to itself. It felt like the forest was folding, rearranging, trying to keep me out. When I finally reached the boundary, or what should have been asterisk, there was no signpost, no ranger gate, no fencing, just a wall of pine and fog. Fog in Arizona. I parked on the gravel shoulder and stepped out. The air smelled of iron and rain, though the sky was clear above. The deeper I went, the thicker the mist grew, until even the sound of the road behind me vanished. Somewhere ahead, a radio crackled to life. "Elkins, report status." It wasn't my voice this time. It was Paulson's. "Paulson!" I shouted. "Where the hell are you?" Static. Then, "Don't trust what you see." Something moved in the fog. A figure in Ranger green stepped out onto the path. Same uniform, same posture. For a moment, I thought I'd actually found him, until he smiled, and his teeth gleamed the way they had in my phone screen. Too many, too sharp, like light reflecting off broken glass. I raised the revolver. "Stay back." It tilted its head, mimicking me perfectly. Then it said, in my own voice, "You came home to finish your shift." I fired. The sound vanished into the mist like a swallowed breath. The figure didn't fall, it just split, breaking apart into dozens of mirror shards, each carrying a sliver of my reflection. They scattered into the fog, whispering my name as they went. That's when the ground opened beneath me. I fell for what felt like minutes, through air that shimmered like a dark lake until I landed hard on stone. My flashlight flickered on just enough to show me where I was. The mine, the same one from before. But this time, it wasn't empty. Hundreds of mirrored shapes lined the walls, not glass, but bodies, human or almost. Their faces were smooth and reflective, like silver poured over skulls. Each one was standing perfectly still, hands pressed to the rock, as if listening. Then one of them turned its head. Its face shimmered, and beneath the silver, I saw my own features forming. One by one, the others began to change too, their surfaces rippling, until every last one of them wore my face. And they all smiled. They moved in silence, and that was somehow worse than if they'd screamed. Hundreds of copies of me, each one perfect except for the shimmer of liquid light under the skin. I pressed my back to the mine wall and tried to breathe through the panic. Every inhale echoed. Every heartbeat seemed to make them turn a little closer. One of the faces detached from the group and walked forward. It didn't mimic my movement this time. It led. It stepped close enough that the faint heat coming off its skin felt like standing near a lantern. When it spoke, the voice was smooth, layered, like a dozen versions of me talking at once. "You left your post?" "I left because there's nothing left there," I said. My voice cracked. "You took it." It smiled wider, that impossible grin that bent the cheeks too high. "Nothing is ever lost. We keep what the forest gives back." It reached toward me. I swung the flashlight up, its beam scattering across its surface. For an instant, the thing rippled. Dozens of faces flashed through it. Paulson, the old rangers, strangers I'd never seen. Then the light dimmed, like it was being absorbed. "You shouldn't have come back," it said. Behind it, the others began to move, slowly, purposefully. Each one took a step toward me, feet in perfect rhythm like a mirrored dance. The tunnel, filled with a hum of static, low and pulsing, vibrating through my chest. I ran. The tunnel forked, and I picked the left path, the air growing thicker with each stride. The sound of my pursuers followed. No footsteps, just the constant hiss of shifting reflections. The beam of my light bounced off wet walls, catching shapes that might have been symbols carved into the rock. Circles intersected by jagged lines like broken eyes. The hum grew sharper. Then I heard my own voice again, faint, ahead of me. "This way." It sounded desperate, human. "Paulson!" I shouted. A silhouette stood at the far end of the passage. It was him, or it looked like him, battered, pale, trembling. He waved me forward. "Hurry, before they—" The beam of my flashlight hit him squarely, and his face split open down the middle, peeling like silver paper. Beneath it, another reflection waited. My own. Che! I stumbled back, horror locking my throat. The copies reached the end of the corridor and stopped. The lead figure, the first one that had spoken, raised its hand and touched the tunnel wall. The stone shifted under its touch, melting into a dark glass that reflected the entire mine like an endless corridor. "We're all mirrors," it said. "You look long enough, and the glass looks back." The reflection began to move on its own, separate from the figure casting it. It walked right out of the wall. I fired again, emptying the revolver until the echo was the only sound left, but the bullets never hit. They just vanished into that liquid dark. And then the reflection smiled and whispered, "Your shift ends when we say it does." Something cold brushed the back of my neck. I turned. Nothing. Then again, harder. Hands, dozens of them, pressing against my skin, my chest, my face, pulling. The world tilted, and I saw myself through their eyes, smaller, weaker, fading. I dropped the flashlight, and the beam spun across the ground, catching the floor as it rippled like water. For an instant I saw the surface, trees, stars, the distant glow of my house, my reflection standing inside it, looking down at me. It raised a hand in a mock salute. Then it turned and walked away. I tried to scream, but the sound came out muffled, like shouting through glass. The last thing I remember is falling through the dark, weightless, until there was only static and the whisper of my own voice repeating the same word again and again. Copy. Story 3. When I first took the assignment at Dry Lake Reserve, I thought it was a joke. On the map, it was marked as DLR 47 Temporarily Decommissioned Zone. The file said it was a former floodplain that had dried up decades ago after the dam upstream collapsed. The government had fenced it off and declared it a protected site for ecological stabilization. But when I got there, there was no fence, no trail markers, just dust. Miles and miles of gray, cracked soil and blackened reeds that whispered like paper when the wind passed through. My name's Ranger Eli Vance, 43, former fire suppression unit. I'd been reassigned to this ghost zone after a string of bad luck and worse paperwork. The official job? Monitor seismic activity around the old lake bed and log environmental readings twice a day. Nothing too physical, nothing dangerous. That's what they said. My cabin was an old ranger post sitting half buried on the northern ridge. The first thing I noticed when I opened the door was the smell. Damp, metallic, like rain hitting rust. The second thing I noticed was the wall of photographs pinned beside the desk. Old faded Polaroids showing what the place used to look like. A real lake, blue water, canoes, kids feeding ducks, the kind of summer postcard that didn't exist anymore. Only one photo stood out. It showed the lake from above at dusk, the sunlight turning it blood orange. But right in the center of the photo, there was a perfect black circle, a hole. It looked burned into the water itself. Someone had written under it in pencil. The eye, July 14th, 1976. The days passed slow. You'd think nothing could happen in a place that dead, but there were sounds at night. A deep, hollow thump every few hours, like something enormous shifting under the ground. The first few times, I logged it as tremors, but the seismograph never recorded anything. The earth didn't move. The sound just was. Sometimes it came with voices. Not clear ones, more like murmurs, like wind scraping through a throat. I'd step out on the porch, scan the lake bed with my flashlight, and always see the same thing. The cracked ground, stretching for miles flat as bone except for the very center, where the soil dipped slightly, as if the lake still remembered being deep. I started calling that dip the basin. The agency had left behind an old drone in the shed, so one afternoon I decided to fly it over the basin for a better look. The feed flickered with static, the signal weak. When it finally stabilized, the screen showed something strange. A circle, perfectly symmetrical, about 30 feet across. It looked wet. But that was impossible. There hadn't been a drop of rain in months. When I zoomed in, the image pixelated, but I could have sworn I saw movement like ripples spreading outward, as if something beneath was breathing. Then the drone feed cut out. I recovered the drone later that evening. It was lying on the cracked dirt, still warm, battery dead. The lens, though, it was warped, melted slightly like it had been close to a heat source. When I brought it back to the cabin, I noticed my reflection in the lens was off. For a second, it didn't move when I did. 3 nights later, I woke up to tapping on the cabin window. Soft at first like a branch, then firmer, intentional. I sat up, heart thudding. The lantern was still on. The air inside smelled of ozone, sharp and clean, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Outside, nothing. Then I saw them. Footprints, dozens of them, small, bare, and leading from the edge of the basin right up to my porch steps. They weren't there when I went to bed. I grabbed my radio. "Base, this is DLR 47 Northridge Cabin. Do you read?" Static. Then a faint voice, like it was far, far away. "You're not supposed to be there, Eli." I froze. That wasn't base command. That was a child's voice. I stepped outside, scanning the ground with my light. The prints were fresh, moist, as if whoever made them had stepped out of water. They led toward the lake bed, glistening faintly in the moonlight. I should have gone back inside, but I followed them. The basin looked darker that night. The moon hung low, and the air shimmered above the dirt as if from heat, even though the temperature had dropped to 40 degrees. I knelt beside the first footprint and touched it, wet, cold. When I held my fingers up, they shone faintly. Not water, something thicker. The footprint circled the basin, then disappeared right where the earth dipped deepest. That's when I heard it again, the thump. Only this time, it wasn't under the ground. It was beneath me. The dirt swelled under my boots, lifting slightly before settling again with a sighing sound, like something had just exhaled. The air went still. My flashlight flickered once, then twice. Then the ground cracked open. A fissure split the basin center. From inside came a smell, brine and rot, the scent of something long buried waking up, and faintly, under the stench, came another sound. Splashing. Water was seeping through the cracks. Slowly, impossibly, the lake was returning. I stepped back, almost tripping over a stone. Then I saw movement inside the fissure. Fingers. Pale, thin, slick, like glass, reaching upward. I turned and ran. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I watched the horizon from the porch, shotgun in hand, waiting for dawn. But the sun came up dull and red, and when I looked out over the basin again, it was flat, dry, and still. No fissure, no footprints, no water. I almost convinced myself it had been a dream, until I checked my boots. The soles were wet. The next day, I found a package on my porch. No label, no note, just a metal case. Inside were 10 old audio reels marked with black marker. Dry Lake Field Recordings, 1976. One of them had a different tag. July 14th, the Eye. That night, I loaded it into the reel player. The tape hissed, then began to play. A man's voice, older, steady, professional. Day 142, water levels dropping again. Residents report new sinkholes forming near the eastern banks. Seismic readings remain inconsistent. Visibility poor due to fog. Night Watch reports lights beneath the surface, possible gas pockets. We'll confirm. Static. Then, At 0200 hours, a child's voice was heard near the dock. No residents unaccounted for. Investigating. More static. Then faint, in the background, laughter. And then a single sentence whispered close to the mic. It's not a lake, it's a lid. The recording cut out. I sat there for a long time, listening to the empty hiss of the reel spinning. And then I noticed the reflection again, on the metal casing. Behind me, a figure, small, still, standing in the doorway. When I turned, there was nothing there, just the open night and the faint smell of wet earth blowing in from the basin. But on the floor, right where the shadow should have been, there were footprints. Small, wet, and leading out of the cabin this time. By the next morning, the tremors had returned, louder, heavier. The basin had changed again. It was deeper now, the cracks forming a near-perfect circle. From the ridge, I could see faint shimmer inside the pit, like the surface of dark water moving under sunlight. Except there was no sun. The clouds above had gone completely still, frozen mid-motion like a photograph. The world felt paused. And then the radio came to life again. That same voice, the child. Eli, you're looking at the wrong side. The static deepened into a low hum that made the windows vibrate. Then the sound of water, rushing, rising, swallowing. When I looked out again, the basin was full. A lake, impossibly sudden and perfectly still. And in the center, something huge floated just beneath the surface, round, black, and faintly pulsing. An eye. The lake stayed there all day. No rain, no runoff, no source. It just existed flat and black and silent as glass. From the ridge, I could see faint ripples spreading from the center, though there was no wind. It was like the water was breathing, each pulse in time with that low hum that had taken over the air. By noon, the radio had gone dead. The seismograph needle swung wildly, but the ground itself didn't shake. It was something else that was moving the space around me. The sky had turned the color of ash. No birds, no insects. The air hung heavy, thick with that damp, metallic scent. I told myself I was just here to document. That's what rangers do, we observe. We record. But every instinct I had was screaming to leave. Except the road out was gone. I hiked the north trail that led back to the highway, but halfway there, it just ended. Literally, the earth sheared off like a cliff, and below it was nothing. No trees, no valley, no horizon, just fog, thick, opaque, unmoving. When I tossed a rock in, there was no sound of it hitting bottom. That's when I realized something the world hadn't changed around Dry Lake. Dry Lake had changed the world. I went back to the cabin, hands shaking, trying to keep my breath even. I told myself I'd wait it out, that rescue would come eventually. When I opened the door, I stopped. The photographs were different. All the Polaroids, the happy campers, the boats, the old picnic scenes, they darkened. The lake in each one was no longer blue. It was black. And the people in the photos weren't looking at the camera anymore. They were facing away, all of them staring out at the water. In one of them, I swear I could see a figure in the distance standing on the lake surface. A child. I grabbed the tape recorder again. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. I played the July 14th reel again. Same hissing, same voice. Then new sound, faint at first, then clearer. Splashing, running feet. A man shouting, "Get away from the water." And then a scream, high-pitched, sharp, abruptly cut off. Then silence. When the tape ended, the reel kept spinning, but another sound began faint, mechanical, not coming from the speaker, from the window. A hum, rhythmic and wet, like something big moving underwater. I stepped to the window and froze. Someone was standing at the shore, far out, near the center, ankle deep in the black water. It looked like a child, wearing what might have been a ranger's jacket too big, sleeves dragging. Their hair was slick, clinging to their neck. They turned. Even from that distance, I felt the weight of that gaze. I could see their eyes, wide, dark, glistening like oil. They lifted a hand and pointed at me. Then they spoke. Even across the lake I heard it clearly. "What? Help me come up?" My legs moved before my brain caught up. I was halfway down the slope before I realized what I was doing. The wind had stopped. Even my footsteps sounded distant, muffled, like the air itself was thickening. When I reached the basin's edge, I stopped. The water surface was perfectly smooth, except where the child stood. Around them, the ripples spiraled outward, and underneath, faint movement, shapes shifting. "Who are you?" I shouted. The child tilted their head. Their mouth didn't move, but I heard the voice again, inside my skull this time. "Please, you have to let me in." Something broke the surface behind them, a large round bubble that didn't pop. It shimmered, black and red, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The child didn't react. They just watched me, hands still raised. I took a step closer. The mud under my boot was slick, wet. I hadn't seen a drop of rain, yet the ground was soaked through. "Let you in where?" I asked. The voice again, soft, echoing from everywhere. "Here, it's cold. I've been waiting." The surface rippled again, and for the briefest moment, I saw faces under the water. Dozens, maybe hundreds, twisting slow, pale like reflections caught in glass. Their eyes glowed faintly, all looking upward. The child turned toward them, and then sank straight down. No splash, no ripple, just gone. I don't remember running back. I only remember slamming the cabin door, locking it, dragging the table against it, then sitting with the shotgun across my lap until the light outside dimmed. That night, I heard footsteps on the porch again. But this time they weren't small. Each step was heavy, wet, deliberate. The boards creaked under the weight. The knob turned once, twice, then stopped. And then the voice, closer than ever. "Eli, help me come up." The doorknob began to twitch, slowly rotating. I raised the gun. The lantern light flickered. Then nothing. The sound stopped. When I dared to look through the window, no one was there. But on the porch, there were footprints again, not small this time. Huge, bare, and trailing away toward the basin. By dawn, the water had risen higher. It lapped at the base of the ridge now, swallowing the ground where the old road used to be. The lake wasn't filling with water. The lake was the water. The entire land was sinking beneath it. I packed what I could, the tapes, my notes, some food, and tried to head for higher ground. But every direction led back to the same place, the ridge, the cabin, the lake, like the whole world was folding in on itself. By noon, I saw something new at the center of the water. The child again, floating this time. But they weren't alone. There were others now, figures surfacing slowly, silently, as if rising to breathe for the first time. Men, women, children, faces pale and smooth as stone, their eyes opened in unison. And every single one of them was looking at me. The hum became a roar. The air shimmered with heat. The smell of rust grew stronger. I fell to my knees as the pressure hit like a hand pushing down on my chest. The water started to churn, rising, spinning, forming a vortex at the center. The figures didn't move. They just stared as the same black circle from the photograph, opened beneath them. It wasn't water anymore. It was something else, liquid shadow, thick and endless. And inside it, I saw myself. My reflection stood beneath the surface, perfect in every detail, except for one thing: it was smiling. Not a human smile, a stretched, knowing curve. It lifted a hand, mirroring me exactly, then pressed its palm against the underside of the surface. The water bulged outward where our hands met, trembling like a membrane about to burst. Then it whispered, "Switch," and I fell forward. The surface didn't break. It accepted me, cold, heavy, silent. The world above blurred into pale light as I sank deeper, deeper. The figures surrounded me, eyes open, mouths closed, their faces calm and waiting. The child floated past, eyes still locked on mine, their lips moved soundlessly. Below, the eye pulsed again, pulling everything toward it. And then, as the pressure built to the point of bursting, I saw through it a vast space, black and red, filled with silhouettes moving like a slow tide. Not human shapes, larger, older. They were watching, and I understood. The lake wasn't a lake at all. It was a door. A thin place where the world had worn too thin, and something underneath was pressing to get through. The people who disappeared in 1976 hadn't drowned. They'd been taken down. And now, so had I. When I woke, I was lying on dry ground again. The lake was gone. The basin was cracked and empty, the same as when I'd first arrived. The sun was shining. The radio buzzed faintly with static. For a second, I thought it had all been a hallucination. Then I saw my reflection in the window. It smiled before I did. The rescue team found me 3 days later. I was dehydrated, delirious, mumbling about eyes and water. They said the entire basin had been bone dry for over 40 years. They didn't find any footprints, no lake, no child, nothing. They sent me for evaluation. The doctor said I'd experienced temporal disorientation and environmental hallucination due to isolation. They released me 2 weeks later. I went home, tried to forget. But sometimes late at night, I wake up and the air feels damp. The sound of dripping echoes from the walls. And in the corner of my room, there's a small puddle that wasn't there before. Sometimes, when I look into it, I see movement. Sometimes, I hear that same voice, faint and familiar. Help me come up. And I realized maybe I never really left Dry Lake. Maybe it just followed me home,